Hi there, everyone. Lars and Scott back with another Dandadan review and analysis brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And we've got yet another great episode of this whole wacky, dark sci-fi amazing adventure that we call Dandadan.
Well, I wouldn't call it just dark sci-fi because it's very wacky and humorous at the same time. I feel like, and I feel like it's the case with a lot of anime. There's a lot of comedic levity thrown into a lot of the like dark, moody elements that are thrown in that you're not gonna find in a lot of like Western stuff. And
Yeah.
it that part really appeals to me a lot of the time because like I want a serious story, but I also want a laugh. I don't want to be drugged down all the freaking time. So having a bit of levity in the middle of it is perfect. Like I love the fight against the like in the school with the Loch Ness monster and the aliens and the mantis shrimp alien and all that kind of stuff because it's a very serious fight. Their lives are on the line, but they're having to fight and like figure out how to handle the situation in a very comedic way. And that's what gives me hope. That's what like lets me know that oh, they're probably going to get out of this because there's still a bit of comedy. They're still able to laugh at the situation. If they suddenly cut all of that like like comedic part of it, then I would be just lose a lot of that hope. It'd be a lot more of a hopeless situation, I guess.
It'd be a lot more emotionally draining to watch.
Yes.
Whereas honestly with Dandadan, like you finish an episode and you're like, where's the next one? You feel pumped. You feel pumped for the next episode. And yeah, no, the show definitely does a great job of blending elements from multiple genres to tell this incredible story. And that's something that we definitely want to talk about here in this episode because, as I was telling Scott, I saw an article that said that this episode betrayed what Dandadan is, that it wasn't what the show needed. It was a disaster in comparison to all the other episodes. And like, I think that someone who was writing this was either looking for clicks or really missed the points. Because this episode delivered on a lot of things that we needed. And yes, it definitely pumped the brakes on the energy that we've recently been having with the whole fight in the school against the mantis shrimp alien, the whole UFO, all the crazy, amazing whatnot with Nessie. It's okay to pump the brakes a little bit and focus in on some of these characters, build them up, have a little zany adventure before introducing us to the next big arc.
Which I feel like, other than like the original start into the anime, that's what this entire season so far has been like. Because like there's been a lot of build up and then you have the crazy stuff happen and then we're back to like building up and then more crazy stuff. And this is one of those build up episodes, especially when we're introducing a new character. Because we did the same thing with Ida when she first got onto the scene. And now we've got Gigi, a new character we're having to introduce. We're having to learn about like that guy's idiosyncrasies. And like, especially when you're adding a new character to the story, you have to give them time to like express themselves. You have to give the audience time to see what kind of character they are. Otherwise, they're not going to attach themselves to the character. Although I have seen a lot of memes recently of people hating on Gigi, but I think that has more to do with like the relationship and the shipping aspect of things than anything.
Yeah, because Gigi is a pretty fun character and there's a lot of depth to him already in this episode if we're willing to pay attention. So with that being said, let's dive into a quick overview of the events of this episode before we start talking about what we really took away from this, especially as writers. So this episode picks up literally right where we left off last time, with Momo opening up the door, showing Gigi, Okarun learning that this is her old friend and especially her first crush. and he's the cool guy. Like everything about him outwardly depicts that. And then things get a little bit weird when he starts getting a little bit jokey. And Momo very clearly is not quite as into it, especially as later her classmates are. Okarun immediately interprets this as like, oh my gosh, they're reconnecting. What if she still secretly likes him? Gah! And thus begins a slow spiral into depression for him throughout much of this episode. Gigi has been invited to live with Momo's family for a while because of problems that have been happening in his life. The house that his parents bought, there's something wrong there. There's something weird happening. And every spiritualist, exorcist, and an authority on the matter who's been brought in has had horrible things happen to them. Some of them even offing themselves as a result of whatever's gone on in there. So Gigi's there to kind of be safe and just start figuring some things out with Momo for eventually going and checking out the house. And we get some interesting stuff going on here because as Gigi is kind of like awkwardly flirting with Momo and with Seiko's just like, oh wow, you are a genius. Here, kid, eat up. And hold on to that, because that's going to be important for later. But she keeps praising this weirdo who it's hard to tell what exactly, like, what is his personality. This carries on over to the next day when they go to school, and he's introduced, and he immediately takes over the introduction from the teacher and is trying to make the class laugh. He's flirting with the girl up front, asking for her number, and then when he's told to go sit by Miss Ayase, he saunters on back there, and he's like, oh, we're lovers, we're engaged. And her friend's like, oh, no, you're not. She belongs to Okarun. And Momo's just like dying in the corner. Just like, please let this end. And Gigi just does not help matters at all, being the class clown. And just as a very quick aside, I knew a guy kind of like this in high school. And I'm so glad that we got him to speak at graduation. He was one of our keynote speakers. We got the class clown to talk. So while he's acting the part of the class clown, Okarun, we cut to during break time. Okarun is once again at the back of one of the buildings. He's doing his workout. He's thinking to himself about how he's got to get stronger. He's got to show that he's worth something to Momo, but at the same time, he's like, but what if Momo wants to get back together with Gigi? What if she still has lingering feelings? And then there's a window of hope as Momo arrives to spend break with him. And Okarun's just like, oh, yeah, I've not been thrown out, which I did skip over the fact that when he leaves her place for the night and they're supposed to do the whole goodbye ritual, he leaves very dejected because he's just not sure what his place is in Momo's life anymore. He feels that three's a crowd, and he thinks that he's the third wheel. Momo coming to find him gives him this moment of hope. He's like, oh yeah, my friendship with her isn't over, and I still have these feelings for her. I gotta make sure to figure those out. And just as they start getting comfortable and settled, Gigi shows on up, bringing with him that fantastic yogurt that Momo likes, and immediately Okarun's just like, okay, no, she doesn't need me. She needs him. This is awkward. I'm going to leave. And as he goes, it's a hard hitting punch of just I'm not that guy. I'm not the guy who's going to get the girl. And if I stick around, I'm just going to make things awkward because I'm the awkward guy. And right as he thinks that, right as he rounds the corner, you've got a mannequin chasing right towards him, screaming its head off. And he's like, oh crud, runs. He starts running from Momo and Gigi. The mannequin starts going. The mannequin crashes into all of the Momo's trying to hold on because they see a golden ball flash What if this is Okarune's missing testy and testicle and thus the chase ensues with Momo holding on to the mannequin, Gigi holding on to her, both of them getting yoinked right off of the campus, and Okarune taking off his shoes, donning on Turbo Granny's powers, giving chase, and thus we got a chase through the streets in broad daylight, running into cars, destroying people's rooftops. Hopefully they have insurance. The mannequin breaking itself to get away. Momo finally gets a hold of its heart, uses the heart to beat it up, and then they follow its cries of agony, and they find the mannequin at the junkyard, trying to find the other mannequin that it's oh so in love with. And the episode ends with Okarune listening to this confession and being inspired by the mannequin that, hey, maybe my feelings do count for something. They're real. I should chase them too. And that's the episode.
I like this episode. I mean, I've liked all of the episodes so far, but, and I'm just going to come out right and say this, we don't have to have the crazy serious battles every single episode. I mean, I know that's what a lot of people come here for, and I know that's what a lot of people are used to when it comes to anime. But I feel like having a show that has a good mix of a bunch of different genres makes for a much better story overall, because we're able to see more of the characters. We're able to get more attached to these characters. We're able to laugh and cry with them. And then when we get to the crazy, like, fight scenes, we're with them every step of the way. It matters more to us that they win. And if it seems like they're losing, then we're really worried for them. This is the kind of episode that sets up that kind of feeling.
I agree. We need to have these slower episodes in order to get to know these characters, so that way we can connect with them. And as you're talking earlier, like, there's all these memes of people kind of hating on Gigi, and sure, that a lot of that probably has to do with the shipping war aspect. But Gigi is a fun and interesting character. And this episode gives us some good insights into who he is. He's not just the dumb goofball that you might think, so long as you're paying attention to what's playing out in this episode.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. I definitely see a character who, like, we get that really deep dive into what's going on at his house. His parents are getting sick. The mediums that they've had to come and try and exorcise whatever's going on at that place end up, like, a bunch of them end up unaliving themselves. And, like, you can see some deep mental scars in this kid. But, like, at the same time, you see a goofball, a class clown. And I feel like a lot of that humor is a way to, like, cope and deal with that serious stuff that's happened in his life.
Mm-hmm. And he definitely wants people to react to this humor, because as long as the laughs are going, it prevents the darkness and the feelings of whatever he's been going through from assaulting him and taking a hold of his conscious, of his thoughts, because he doesn't want to be stuck with whatever's happened. Laughter is a great way of escaping that. And as you watch the episode, like, he definitely wants to reconnect with Momo. A lot of his jokes, a lot of his antics are directed at her, but when she doesn't react, he immediately latches onto whoever is. And he starts making jokes in their direction, or he starts having antics thrown in their direction, and they give him the reactions that he's looking for, that just builds and builds and builds, and for a time that staves off the darkness that he feels, which is a darkness that we get a very brief glimpse of by the end of this episode. And you're like, oh no.
Well, and now we know, because Seiko's like, oh yeah, I can't deal with anything that's outside of the city limits. So, Momo, you have to deal with this. And so we know that, like, something serious and scary is coming up. But that's not the focus of this episode. And I love Momo's reaction to, like, Gigi's antics, because it shows a prior relationship that didn't end all that well. And like we get a bit of explanation because Gigi full on apologizes for being a jerk and being a bully, and we're seeing that because like Momo's seen these antics before, and she's just not gonna like react to him. She's not gonna like feed into that because she's seen where that ends up, and she doesn't want to get hurt like that again.
And I love that. I love that kind of nuance.
Mm-hmm.
This is where too many authors have gotten to the point of where when we talk about show don't tell, this is the show. But there's plenty of dialogue happening. And this is something that I think too many young authors miss. That when they think of show don't tell, they think of almost no dialogue, just show. And then when it comes to dialogue, okay, now I need to tell. Let me just word vomit. Here's a whole essay to explain these characters. Dandadan respects the intelligence of its audience enough to give us what we need and not go further than that.
Yeah.
And you can pick up on those cues and clues and get all of this. And if you don't, then at least the action and the humor is enough to still pull you along until more explanation is given. And then what you missed makes sense in retrospect.
Right. I love it when a story, especially in an anime, but like any story, takes the time to, like, they realize that a good dialogue is a great way to showcase your characters. And it's a great way to move the story along because one character is not going to know everything. It's going to have to take multiple characters involved in the situation to progress not just the conversation, but the story as it's going. And Dandadan does a really good job because, like, we're not going to know anything unless some of these characters, like, start talking. So, like, when they were fighting against the aliens in the school, we didn't know, like, when we first saw the aliens show up, they're scary. They're, like, not talking with anybody. They're this, like, unstoppable silent force. But then, like, we start getting some more interactions between the aliens themselves, and we start getting more of an explanation of why they're there and how they interact with themselves. And, like, it kind of adds to the comedic moment of everything, but it also, like, moves the plot along because it like gives us more world building in that way, because we're not just seeing it from the main character's worldview. We're suddenly getting another character's worldview that's adding to what we already know.
Oh, that's good right there. I don't have anything to add to that.
I really like, and this is something I really wanted to pinpoint in this episode, is specifically with this episode, is because, like, we have a bit of action in this episode, but it's more like the goofy, wacky, comedic chase scene. And Dandadan does a really good job of, like, switching modes on us, because, like, you'll have this super serious moment and then they'll break us out of it. And I feel like, especially when it comes to, like, Okarun's mindset, and we're put right into Okarun's mindset as he's, like, seeing Momo and Gigi interact, that, like, he's starting to spiral. He's starting to doubt himself. His frustrations, his introverted self is starting to come forward, and he's starting to think he's not good enough for Momo and that she's going to run off with, like, her ex kind of idea. When that's not the case. We've definitely seen Momo completely shun her ex and, like, go straight to Okarun a bunch of times. And now, like, Okarun's still spiraling. And then all of a sudden you got a crazy mannequin that they have to race and, like, try and capture. And, like, it's just this goofy fight scene that breaks us out of that spiral. And it's exactly what Okarun needed in that moment. It's exactly what us as the audience needed in that moment, because we're in that spiral with Okarun. Like, we're feeling his doubts. We're, like, seeing how hopeless the situation is. And then, like, the crazy comedy flips the switch and we're, like, busted out of that. And it like, it's a very serious, like, important thing that a lot of people need to figure out how to internalize, because, like, we get in these, like, fight or flight situations, we get tunnel vision, and we focus in really, really hard into trying to get to our safe place. And the thing is, if you're able to instill a bit of humor into yourself, if you're able to like laugh at the situation you're in, you can break yourself out of that tunnel vision and be able to see more of the bigger picture around you. So like you're running through a forest, you're trying to get back to your car, you feel like something's out there in the darkness chasing after you. If you tunnel vision, you're not going to see the branches in your way. You're not going to see any of the rocks that you're going to trip over. But if you kind of like laugh off the situation, a lot of that dread's going to go away. A lot of the like worry and fear is going to kind of lessen, and you're going to be able to see those branches and those rocks. So you're able to get back to your car in like a better situation. And if it has to be dark, morbid humor, more the better. Anything to break yourself out and like help yourself calm down in that situation.
And what's great in this particular moment for Okarun is that when we consider what he's actually telling himself in this moment as he's doom spiraling, this is something that so many people have told themselves. And granted, this is definitely within a dating scenario, but like this can happen in so many ways where I'm not needed. Like three is a crowd. I'm not that special. I'm not the person that someone else needs. And that can go for romance. It can go for friends. It can go for family. It can go for work, where you completely de-appreciate who you are until you are nothing. That's not right. Here's the thing is that there are good messages that you could give to Okarun or to anyone else in that situation to try to help them snap out of it and to give them the catharsis that they need to resolve the issue. The problem is that most people within the doom spiral are not in a position to actually listen to the good stuff that you have to say. And even if it gets to them like afterwards, sometimes the moment is lost and sometimes the real weight of that message is gone. And what Dandadan does is rather than give us that message that Okaru needs and that we as the audience need, it slaps us over the head with this ridiculous scene. And it is bonkers. And I can understand why some people, again, coming back to the article I talked about at the very beginning of the video, why some people might be all like, this just didn't feel quite right. This feels so out there, even for Dandadan. And it's like, well, the point is that the only thing that could have broken Okarun out of this was that he needed a distraction, something completely unrelated to Momo and Gigi in that moment. And what he discovers is not only the message that he needed at the end to get himself out of that doom spiral, he actually proves himself in this episode as well. Because Momo, for all of her powers, is completely caught off guard. She's trying so hard to hold on to this really, really fast mannequin, while Gigi's holding on to her and making everything worse. And while Momo's smart and capable, that's too much at one time. She can't handle it. And so Okarun shows up. He is the knight in shining armor for this moment to come on in and help her to handle the situation, give her the power and the speed that she needs and the stability that she needs. Okarun proved himself in this episode. And then by having gone through this and being just a good friend, which is what he's needed to be this whole time, he then can have that moment while watching the mannequins and then have that revelation that his feelings do matter. And at this point, he is open and ready to hear that message, even if it's from himself, because he's been snapped out of the doom spiral by being active, by helping Momo and Gigi, by embracing his powers. And he isn't even thinking, oh, I have to prove myself to Momo. He's just doing the right thing at the right time. And again, this is something that many novice authors miss because they want it to be so clear to the audience that Okarun is doing the thing that's going to solve his problems. And the story doesn't need to be that blunt. This scene becomes more enjoyable the more that you analyze it and understand what's happening.
Yeah. And I also feel like just because Dandadan's such a character-driven story, that like a lot of the humor that we have in this story is all based off of character interactions. And I feel like if you're gonna set up like a joke in this kind of situation, you have to have multiple characters playing into that joke. So like we've got this chase scene and Gigi has no idea what's going on. So he's freaking out. He's trying to like cope with what's going on. Momo's completely focused on the mannequin. And then Okarun shows up in the Turbo Granny form and Gigi starts freaking out more. Like that's just humor at this point.
Mm-hmm. And it's also a good clue.
Yeah.
It's also a good clue because that means that Gigi can see what's actually happening, which everyone else usually can't.
Exactly. But like you have this crazy chase scene going on, and like having a character who doesn't understand what's going on, like he's the straight man in this situation, because like Japan's really well known for their like manzai, which is basically like duo comedy, and so you've got like the funny guy and then you've got the straight guy. And the funny guy like says some crazy stuff and the straight guy's like, no, that's not normal, like stop, kind of idea. And it adds to the comedy of the situation. So Gigi in this sense is suddenly the straight guy to like the craziness that's going on. My mind just blanked. Hello.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, still here. So you blanked at Gigi is the straight guy to...
Yeah, my mind just blanked. Okarun? I'm like,
oh wow.
Well, no, to the whole situation. He's a straight guy to the whole situation going on. Because like we know what's going on, but like we're so used to the craziness at this point that this is actually tame compared to what they've been up against. But throwing in Gigi, who has no idea what's going on, the same with Ida in like the Red Silky arc, it like we're getting a fresh perspective on what's going on, and it's like readjusting our view to let us know, hey, this still isn't normal. This still isn't like still out of the range of what's normal in their lives. And so we're able to see both perspectives in this.
Now that's an excellent point. And thinking about like let's talk a little bit about how to actually craft good comedy, which is kind of rich from the two of us because we ourselves are not necessarily comedians. We both have humor that we really like and that we know how to do, but writing humor in general is an art unto itself. There are those people who are very gifted at it, and then there's those who need to put in the work. And being able to understand some of the stuff that like makes great situational humor or great conversational humor, great slapstick, or great wordplay is going to take some work. Now then, a straight man is great for wordplay and situational humor. A straight man isn't always great for stuff like slapstick, because the point to slapstick is that it gets ridiculous, that you're doing great feats of physical comedy that are completely out of the ordinary. You don't need a straight man to tell you that. So right here already a little bit of nuance to how humor is approached. And Gigi in one moment is the straight man, in the other moment he's the comedian or the person who is providing the slapstick comedy. And so watching what Gigi does is important for understanding the humor in the situation.
Right. And I love all the like misunderstood innuendo that's going on, because like again, he's a straight man, he doesn't know the context clues or what's going on with the golden ball, and so they keep talking about the Kintama, the golden ball, and he's like, when did like this crass humor become so popular? What did I miss? And like that's one of the best jokes in this entire episode in my opinion, because it's just like yeah, they're talking about balls, but like there's specific context that you would have to know in this situation.
And also within the situation, it becomes funnier and funnier to see how Okarun just begins to accept it even more, that Momo's just going to refer to his balls. Because if we consider like he's the straight-laced kid, and now he's just like, whatever, it's my balls.
I mean, the first few episodes, he's freaking out because he's got nothing there. And so, like, to us at this point, it's old hat. But, like, throwing in a new perspective, I think is great with that sense of humor. Because it, like, re-alivens it. It's not, like, you're not killing the joke by saying it over and over and over again. You're introducing a new character with a new perception of what's going on. And adding new nuance to the joke. And I think that's important. If you want to keep using that same joke over and over again, you need to add nuance to it. It needs to get deeper than it already is.
And this leads to a conversation we were having before we recorded about how the Ken Takakura joke, in your opinion, is pretty one note. And I have to agree that there's definitely a one-note aspect to it where it can very easily become boring and annoying if it is done too much, which is that someone says Okarun's real name and Momo is going to blank or freak out. Mm-hmm. And that can be an amusing character flaw of hers. But if it's something that we don't get any real development for or explanation of, it's a joke that you can't just keep hitting the button on like a laugh track and hoping that it will remain funny. It's a joke that can very easily overstay its welcome.
Yeah, which I feel like it's setting up a really good chance, and we'll have to see like what they do with it, but it's setting up a really good like character building moment and like view into Momo's character if we're able to find out why she's so into Ken Takakura, like why that actor specifically and hearing his name matters so much to her. Because like we've got a little bit like in the first like couple of episodes, but I feel like it's not a deep enough look into why it matters so much to her. And if we're able to find like that deeper element of like why it's important, then it's going to add more nuance to that joke. It's going to add like a deeper, more meaningful part to that joke. And after that, yeah, like I wouldn't mind seeing it a couple more times. But if you keep doing it without like adding more to the joke, then it's going to lose its flavor.
Yeah, there's some jokes that can definitely overstay their welcome. Which I just have to say this as a quick aside. That I've ranted about how Lopin from the Stormlight Archive isn't very funny later on in the series. Mm-hmm. I feel like somehow the Cosmos has given my criticism of that to Sanderson, because in the 5th book, Lopin has returned back to the good old Lopin that I love and adore, and so I'm totally okay with it. And part of it comes is that he knows how to be jokey, but he stopped with the freaking one note jokes. And I'm like, yay! There we go. You are funny. Just don't use the same joke over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really big thing when it comes to writing comedy, is like don't overextend your joke. And like when you can tell you're trying too hard, when you're trying to add too much into it and like you're saying it over and over again, like that's when you need to drop it. That's when you need to come up with either a new joke or to focus on something else. Also, when it comes to like writing humor like that, you need to like really look at the different kinds of humor you can inject with it. Because like we've been talking about like bunch of physical humor, slapstick. There's a lot of like relationship humor. There's a lot of character like shenanigans that are funny. And like you can mix and match those as much as you want. You have a lot of situations in the show where their lives are on the line, and having a bit of dark humor in those situations, I think really makes this show. It makes or break the situation. And like I was talking about before with like using that humor to break yourself out of the tunnel vision. That's what this does for, especially for us, the audience. Cause like, especially at the start of like, they're trapped in the school with these aliens. You've got Nessie like powering up and launching Godzilla laser beams, and like it's just like scary. It's just messing with them. And then like we get a lot of comedy kind of giving us hope into like them dealing with the situation, and it breaks us out of that television. It breaks the characters and us as the audience out of that kind of like horror hole that we were dropped into, and now we see a path out of it.
And the humor in this show, and this is what makes it, I think, really so intelligent and really just fun to get into, is all these things that the humor is doing. The humor is giving us the necessary levity and break that we need during moments of like intense action, intense spookiness. The humor is also giving us insights into the personalities of these characters. The humor is there to kind of just help maintain what the show has given to us. In the first episode promised us that this is going to be a zany, wacky story, along with all these other elements, and the moments of physical comedy, miscommunication comedy, relationship comedy, wordplay comedy, slapstick humor, dark humor. All of this helps to maintain in any given situation a certain level of zaniness, so that way we feel like the show isn't going back on what it's promised us to do. Dude, the show has remained fairly consistent since its opening episode all the way up until now. And so this episode, sorry whoever wrote that Screen Rant article or whatever, this episode has not betrayed what Dandadan is. It is not a step back from what the story is at all. This is just a continuation. It's definitely not as high octane as many of the other episodes, but that's okay, especially because knowing what I know of the manga, there's no way that we could have gotten the next big arc in 2 episodes. That would have ruined a lot of great stuff. And so rather take the time to get Okarun to where he's got to be for the next story, get Gigi to where he's got to be for the next story, get Momo to where she's got to be for the next story, give us all the proper context, along with all of the jokes, and we will be ready for the second half of the season when it premieres next year.
Right. And it's giving each of the characters, especially Gigi, who's new into the situation, the time they need to like actually be built into the story. It's a major thing with short story writing is every new character you add to the story, you need to add at least another 1,500 to 2,000 words to your story. And with short stories, when you're trying to be like as short as possible, as succinct as possible, you want to keep that number of characters down, because that's just gonna like make your story a bit too long. But in this situation, we're not having to worry about that. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is that when you're introducing a character, you need to have the time to actually give us their character and make the audience, us as the audience, actually connect with them in some way before we start throwing crazy stuff at them. Like even in the first episode, we had a bit of time of like Momo and Okarun arguing with each other over if aliens and ghosts exist and whatnot, and then they like challenge each other to like deal with the situation. We got that time to actually like see some of their characters before they're thrown into the crazy situation, especially the like really heartfelt talk they had over the phone before stuff really started to go down.
Yeah, we have to have these moments. We have to have these episodes in order to establish the world, but most importantly to establish these characters and their relationships.
Yep.
And what you've said right there is fantastic. Make sure that someone writes that down.
Well, it's actual like writing advice for like writing short stories is just watch how many characters you have, because you have to extend the story based off how many characters you have in it. Like in a very long story, like with Brandon Sanderson's works, he has as much room as he wants to put in as many characters he wants, because he's got the space for it. But when you're writing something shorter, like under 50,000 words, yeah, you want to watch how many characters you have.
Yeah, say as someone who's written a handful of novellas are usually driven by one main character, and then you've got a couple of side characters that you might give a little bit more attention to. but otherwise it's just the adventure of that one main character. Because otherwise, then, like, yeah, if you introduce a brand new character, but then and you make it seem as though there's going to be something big there, and you don't give enough characterization to them, then either it feels like, okay, well, why is this character along? Are they just a plot device? Or even sometimes you might give a character some interesting buildup, but then you don't do anything with that character because, again, you're aiming for only so many words. And so you know that you can't incorporate this character more, then why bother spending that time with this character if that character is not even important?
Mm-hmm.
And so coming back to Dandadan, Gigi is meant to be a very important character throughout the rest of the story. And so we need these episodes to get to know him, especially because so much great chemistry is already there between Momo and Okarun. And Ira was her own particular kind of character with her own character arc. You could have pulled off the same stunts with Gigi as they did with Ira if they made Gigi more of an Ira type character, but he isn't. He's his own person with his own problems, his own motivations, and his own character arc that we're just now getting introduced to. And so that means we need to slow things down. We got to take the time with a little silly adventure on the side to get to know him so that way he can be a part of the greater story. For the episode that everyone said, for the episode that people thought was just more filler, we've ended up having some of the most to say, probably the most to say of any episode thus far.
Well,
wow.
I feel like this episode has more to analyze than like the crazy fast-paced action-paced episode, because like you get a fight and that's all there is, but like you get actual like character progression and like character interactions, the development of Okarun and Momo's relationship, and like there's more to talk about there than one crazy fast-paced fight scene, at least in my opinion.
No, and in most cases that's true. There's some fights that are very meaty, and I would say that the previous fight that we got against the Serpo aliens with the Mantis, with the Mantis Shrimp guy and Nessie, that fight had a lot to offer. I've been waffling on whether or not I want to do a fight analysis, like specifically for that, but a fight can only communicate so much. An episode where you've got a lot of character interaction going on, you can do so much more.
Well, and a fight, and especially in this kind of sense, a fight's really good for making a really eye-catching climax to an arc. But that isn't going to mean anything unless we actually have that build up to that fight scene. And this is what we're doing. We're having that build up to another crazy fight scene. And the more time we have to build up to actually get to know these characters, the more meaningful that fight scene is going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And just knowing what comes ahead in the next arc, we need this. All right. So with all that being said, hope that you guys have enjoyed this this breakdown and analysis of episode 11 of Dandadan. The show just keeps getting better and better, and we're looking forward to see how it rounds off this season, and obviously get ready for the next. But in the meantime, if you're interested in other reviews, analyses, and the likes, then please check out our other videos here on our channel. And if you'd like to support the work that we do, please check out the books that we've published. Links for all of them are in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.
Okini.